Today's a very special episode of the Brown Park Podcast.
This one is nice and close to home for both of us. We've both been to this country and really feel for their people.
Now, in honour of that, we won't be interrupting any part of the conversation with any kind of sponsorship ads or anything like that. But let's kick off the show.
The Brown Park Podcast.
So we have both been to the Ukraine.
One of the best trips of my life, if not the best trip of my life.
The story goes, I had always wanted to go to Chernobyl, and I wanted to go and have a look at one of the most dangerous places on Earth. And I turned around to you and said, hey, do you want to come along? And your answer was immediately,
fuck yes.
Yeah, literally that was the answer. So we packed up and we went to Kyiv, and then we took a trip out to Chernobyl where we spent like 3 days exploring the area, the abandoned city of Pripyat and everything like that. So when Russia invaded at the start of the year, both of us were kind of like, oh my God, what a beautiful country.
Yeah, how can they be doing it to these people? And how are these people holding up through this?
And there's been one Australian that has kept us not only entertained, but up to date with what is going on the front line there. And his name is Bryce Wilson. And we're going to cross to him in the Ukraine right now to talk about it. Bryce Wilson, welcome to the show.
G'day, mate.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity and grateful for you guys reaching out and asking me to participate.
Oh, man, we're grateful that you said yes, because I know the kind of situation that you're under at the moment. I just want to set a scene. Both of us have actually been to the Ukraine, loved the place.
Yeah, beautiful
Loved
place.
Kyiv. We actually spent 3 nights out in Chernobyl, having a look around Pripyat and all the abandoned places. And we both fell in love with the place while we were there. To see what's going on now is absolutely devastating.
Yeah, it's, firstly, I'm glad you guys are able to come here during peacetime because as with you, I kind of felt a deep affinity to Ukraine after coming here the first time. And the war, it's like sad for me on many levels, like because I have friends, for example, who have died fighting here, and also like places where I would live and go and see, or places where I'd interviewed people for journalism. They're occupied or fully destroyed now. Like the war is like catastrophic and confronting on so many different levels.
So let's go back to the start. How did you find yourself in the Ukraine to start with?
Okay,
you shouldn't say the Ukraine. I know that's wrong. In Ukraine. Sorry, I'll get it right.
See, that's a pet hate of mine where people say the Ukraine. It's like the Australia.
No, I appreciate you recognizing that. Yeah, actually, the idea of the Ukraine is that Ukraine was just a borderlands as opposed to its own independent region. So I think I don't think people do that out of any disrespect or anything like that. I know it was quite a common turn of phrase, especially during the last like decades past when the USSR collapsed and everything. So I don't think anything of it, and respect you for being aware of it too. I came to Ukraine the first time in 2015 and did an embedded journalism program with the Ukrainian military. My path to ending up here was a bit strange because I had a hobby interest in photography and filmmaking. I learned how to do that stuff because I used to make content about video games. And I was working in a professional job in Melbourne, working in like marketing roles, and I worked at one company for quite some time. And then very surprisingly to me, I came into work one day and then it said, yeah, your role is redundant. Like basically you're done, mate. And it was really confronting for me because I think I had a much more naive approach to like my professional career, and I kind of trusted my colleagues as friends. And it was very sad for me because like my colleague or someone I thought was my friend was one of the people that signed off on that. And it really caused me to reevaluate a lot of stuff. And I was grateful that they gave me a very decent redundancy package, and I was sort of thinking, like, what's next? You know, what do I actually want to do with my life? Because I did not feel very fulfilled by my job, frankly.
Yeah.
But I understood that I wanted to do something with my skills and everything. And just by sheer chance, I found that the war was still going on in Ukraine and it was underreported. Like, I had this belief that if there's a war going on, it will be in the news, right? Surely people should be informed about this. It just wasn't the case. And I just kind of started to think like, well, I have an interest in photography. I'd always I guess, dreamed of doing conflict photojournalism, which was a very naive sort of attitude, but it was something I wanted to do. So I contacted the Ukrainian Ministry of Information and just asked, is it possible for journalists to embed with the military? And they said, yeah, you just have to fill these forms out. And then like a few weeks later, I was here, I was in Kyiv. And then I went out to the town where I was meant to meet the soldiers, and they picked me up, and basically within a few days of leaving Brunswick and Melbourne, where I'm from, I was on the front lines and already being shot at. And it was, frankly, pretty crazy. And then from there, I just made really good friendships with the blokes that I live with, that I was deployed with, and it served as a motivation to keep coming back. And since then, since 2015, I've basically come here every year and been covering the conflict since.
So in 2015, that was the first time you'd been to the Ukraine, and then you were there to report on the war. Because what are we at? This is like the third invasion, well, third Russian invasion of the Ukraine, of Ukraine at the moment. So how was it at that time when you got there in 2015?
Well, the conflict was sort of in a bit of a frozen state, if you will. It was still very dangerous, and guys were still dying every day. One of the guys I was living with, he was killed, and that was actually one of the really confronting moments for me, because you experience the hyper contrasts of war, the adrenaline, and I won't lie to you, you see cool shit. You see tanks driving around. A few days ago, a fighter jet flew over our car, maybe 20 meters above us. There is all this, there's all this adrenaline, and you're in the field and you're doing stuff that connects with you, and you feel very alive. But then you experience this hyper contrast of going to a guy's funeral in the mud and snow, and you meet his family and they're traumatized, and I was crying when I was there, and so that was really intense to me, and it's really what also helped me understand the war is still going on, and just because it was being underreported didn't mean it had stopped. And even up until before this most recent invasion, there was still a war in eastern Ukraine for 8 years.
So that was Crimea, isn't it?
So Crimea was when I say invaded, I know maybe my definition is different than anybody else's, but Russian military forces entered Crimea and annexed Crimea and held an unrecognized referendum. And then around the same time, Russian military forces also supported and participated in occupying parts of Ukrainian territory in the east, in the Donbass, in Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast. So there was actually two separate events, but I know for many people, what they rightfully understand is Crimea, because that's what was focused on a lot, but they were separate. And during the occupation of eastern Ukraine, the Russian military made multiple incursions into Ukrainian territory to fight the Ukrainian military too.
So cut to today. I first learnt about you and what you were doing, I think, in the video that was shared pretty much right around the world, where you were in the street right at the beginning of the invasion and you went, holy fuck, that was a bomb. Or that was a fighter jet, and you panicked, and that vision went everywhere.
Fuck, it's crazy. I can't believe that Russia has declared war on Ukraine. That as soon as the declaration... There you go. Fuck, that's a missile. That's a missile. That's a fucking missile. That was holy shit.
That has really brought a light to what was going on the ground there. Have you found that as well, that vision that was shared?
It was kind of surreal for me that clip went viral, because my work in Ukraine since 2015, I had basically no interest in, people had no interest in what I was doing. I used to have 3,000 followers on Instagram, and social media was never a motivation for me. It didn't bother me, frankly. I knew that I was doing good stuff for me, and I was proud of the work I was doing. So leading up to the invasion, I was traveling out to the frontline areas nearly every day and reporting on the escalation and live streaming to people as well. So the reason I was streaming was honestly because my friends and family I knew were watching and probably wanted to know what was going on. Yeah. And then when that Russian caliber cruise missile flew over me, and my Aussie mate was there as well, it was crazy. And that clip, I think, was probably seen by millions of people around the world. But I'm very grateful in a way, because what I think exposed a lot of people to my work, and now I have this massive platform to share information and news about Ukraine, and I think it did help people connect with what was going on here, and then the reporting I did in the weeks that followed that.
Well, I think too, I mean, you have to be commended, because as far as Western media goes, it's highly underreported even now. And it's when we look at your feed, jump on your lives, that you actually get the sense of what's actually going on, and you're really explaining and showing the actual picture of war. Because I think in Kyiv's quite sort of away from the conflict, and it seems like people in Kyiv are sort of living their life relatively normal. Is that a correct assumption at the moment?
Yeah, I think I had this sort of same adjustment, because I actually just came back from the front lines a couple nights ago, and it was very surreal for me to go from these like ghost town abandoned cities in the east where homes are destroyed and people are dying, and then come back to Kyiv, and like we're driving around and there are people at bars and at nightclubs, and you know, the city's alive. And in many ways I can't fault them. Like what do I expect from these people, you know? Like, are the guys in the army like fighting for this? Is this their motivation so that people might live freely? I'm very grateful for the fact that sadly over 10,000 Ukrainian people have already lost their lives in this invasion defending the country, and they defend my freedoms to be here and to do this, to be able to speak with you. I just hope the people in the streets here like really appreciate what is happening, and like they're very mindful of it, because when I came here the first time in 2015, it was a similar thing. People lived relatively normal lives in Kyiv and the rest of Ukraine, but then you knew sort of a Melbourne to Sydney distance away, there was a war going on in the east of the country.
Because I think we were there in 2019. Crimea was still active at that point in time?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Crimea has been occupied since 2014, and certainly the war in Donbass has been a recurring, like, there's been active hostilities in Donbass since the war began too, and that's like, you know, there would be lulls in the conflict, and it wasn't all out full-scale warfare, but basically since the war began in 2014, there hasn't not been war fighting in eastern Ukraine.
And maybe that's part of the, I guess, the people in Kyiv. Maybe it's, I don't know, you become immune to it or numb to what's actually going on outside of your current world. I'm just trying to sort of, you know, process in my mind how you could be sitting at a bar knowing that, you know, 1,000 kilometres away there's, you know, people dying, defending your country and your rights to freedom.
Well, I think the missile strikes in Kyiv in the days gone by were a bit of a wake-up call, and my apartment is actually next to the building that was hit, and all the windows had already been blown out from the last time that it was attacked. But we were away in Donbass working near the front lines, and then it happened again. So I don't think people forget they're at war, but I certainly sense there's a level of complacency or ambivalence in a way. And Ukrainian people are very patriotic, and I know they support the military and everything, but it is very strange to visually see people living, even though I support their right to do that.
Now, you've travelled all over the countryside. You've seen the devastation. Like there's literal cities that are just no longer on the map, right?
That's correct. One place I was reporting at before the invasion was a city called Novotoshkivska, and it was kind of close to one of the occupied territories. And I spent a few days there. I went there multiple times over a period of a few days, and I interviewed people who lived there. Like, I have video and photos of them in the town. And then about a month and a half ago, I saw a video came out, and I saw the name of the place, and I said, wait a minute, there's no way that's Novotoshkivska. Sure enough, it was, and it's entirely destroyed. Like, there used to be thousands of people that lived there, and the whole town is now gone. Severodonetsk, a major city near where I was working, across from another city called Lysychansk, 90% of it is destroyed. They say that 80% of the civil infrastructure will probably have to be demolished.
Wow.
Another city called Mariupol, where the Azov unit were encircled in Azovstal, that's entirely destroyed. Like, I was there just before the invasion too, and the city is gone. You know what I mean? There was a thriving startup scene there. A lot of money was invested in Mariupol by a very well-off person who like believed in the city and its future. Like all that's gone. Like the culture and the history there is just destroyed, and it was like Stalingrad.
Well, I mean, we're not seeing, well, in Western media, and that's, I guess, unless you're on your feed and really delving into this whole conflict, you're not seeing a massive amount of collateral damage, or if it is, it's only brief. So how much collateral damage are you seeing firsthand?
Do you mean like damage to apartments?
Yeah. Like just residential areas.
Just to give you an idea, there is the coverage of what's happening, particularly in Australia, because that's where we can report from, is very little at the moment. Yeah, which is shocking.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I have my own issues with the way that media do and don't cover the conflict, and it actually, a big part of the reason I'm glad to have a platform now, especially through Twitter, is because I want to challenge a lot of the way that commercial media report on what's happening here. And frankly, in my opinion, mass media have actually played into Russian propaganda in some ways, and like, in my opinion, created a pretext, or at least there's a significant amount of content that kind of correlates to what the Russian military is saying. So you can walk in Kyiv, for example. If I just walked out of my street and carried my laptop and webcam with you, and we went 100 meters away, there's an entirely destroyed apartment block. There's a factory that was destroyed. In my suburb where I lived during the siege of Kyiv, on my birthday, an apartment building was hit and people were killed there. There's the suburbs on the edge of Kyiv were entirely destroyed. Like, there are places where they're still finding like unexploded mines. People were executed there. The Russian military committed war crimes and atrocities in the suburbs of Kyiv. If you go to a city called Kharkiv, on the north of Kharkiv, there's a suburb called Saltivka, and that suburb is entirely destroyed. Whole apartment buildings, 10, 20 story high apartment buildings, entirely scorched and burned to the ground.
Yeah, well, it's an act of terrorism in my eyes. I think it's that simple.
It is.
Well, it seems like the narrative is certainly shifting now to people saying like Russia needs to be recognized as a terrorist state, because like one thing that people point out is terrorists flew planes into the World Trade Centers, and that was enough to be recognized as a terrorist state. But the Russian military can invade Ukraine, attempt to eradicate its identity, commit genocidal acts, rape the women in Ukraine, murder children, rape children in some instances, destroy whole suburbs, impede restrictions on the Ukrainian language and culture and identity. And for what? Like, at what point are those acts, equivalent to saying this is the acts of a terrorist state?
And why do you think NATO or the Western nations haven't stepped up and done more?
Well, I do know that people in Ukraine are deeply appreciative of the military aid and support and everything they've received, and foreigners come here. Even me as a media personality here, people say to me, like, thank you for coming here and telling people what's going on. If I'm being frank, if NATO got involved or America deployed soldiers here, it would spark World War III.
Right. Yeah.
I think we're already in a cold World War III, if you will. Like, I think it's already playing out, the precursor events. But absolutely, in my opinion, if the Russian military fought the American military, it would start World War III.
Yeah. So I know they have to play it safe, but the picture that gets painted over this side of the world is that Zelensky is a true hero. What's the feeling like about the president there?
People love the guy. I was at his inauguration in 2019, and it was a much different feeling about him there. People were like skeptical, and actually when I told one of my friends that I was going, he's like, we don't really care about Zelensky, he's an idiot. And I was skeptical about him too, but there really is a feeling in Ukrainian culture now and society that he's like a national hero. Yeah. And I mean, personally, I took inspiration from the fact that he stayed here. I thought myself, like, if Zelensky is here and safe, I'll probably be okay. Like, granted, I didn't have a special forces guys protecting me and everything, but I drew inspiration from his morale and the way he was being a leader. And I think many Ukrainian people have done the same.
I think when he whoever it was offered him a safe passage to, I forgot what country, and he said, I don't need a ride, I need guns. And that's sort of when it all, and that sort of sparked me going, what, patriotic, the kind of leader that you would want in a conflict like this. So if he's not leaving, then you're sure as shit probably not going to leave either.
100%. And that line, I think, is actually very powerful because it says to me, it speaks to the Ukrainian people themselves. It's like, we're not going to give up and just run away. Like, help me fight. And actually, I was streaming on my Instagram account earlier, and someone said to me, how can we stop Russia from attempting to control Ukraine? I said, well, honestly, I don't think you're ever going to be able to prevent anti-Ukrainian sentiment within Russian politics and society, but we can ensure that Ukraine has the means to defend itself and to be as free and as independent as possible.
And that's what everyone's trying to do by donating and handing over weaponry and stuff like that, trying to allow you the space to actually defend yourself against this invasion, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's honestly the only sort of pathway at the moment, because as we said, if Western military forces entered Ukraine to defend the country, I absolutely believe it would turn into a shit show.
And I was just going to ask, you're in contact with military at the moment with in certain areas. How's the military morale holding up? I mean, how are the soldiers going at the moment?
Yeah, so I've contacts all throughout Ukraine, fighting in many different areas and deployed in many different areas. And in my opinion, the morale of the people is still high. They just want to know what's happening because, for example, my friend deployed voluntarily to the east, and he's a combat veteran from 2015 to 2017. And they lost 30 guys in the first day from artillery, and then they got pulled off the lines to rest. And he said, well, I don't know what we're doing. Can I go back to Kyiv and go and see my wife for a bit? Are we going to deploy again? What are we actually doing here? I don't get the sense that people's morale is broken in that they've lost the will to fight. I think people just simply want to know, what are we going to do? What's the plan here?
Hey, in the places that you've visited, have you, and there's no easy way of asking this, but have you seen the dead in the street? Have you seen the atrocities that have been committed firsthand?
Yes. I mentioned on my birthday that the apartment building was struck.
Yeah.
There was just a guy just dead on the street, an elderly man just killed. I know in Butcher and Irpin, people were executed and their bodies left on the street, and dogs were going out and eating their faces.
Oh my God.
There were mass graves. You see the catastrophic destruction to people's homes and the way they're maimed and injured and everything, and it's frankly horrific. It is happening. I get frustrated because some people say the war isn't real and it's a conspiracy theory.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah, God.
Yeah.
It's definitely happening, and it is real, and it's traumatic.
So you've got this platform that you're sharing your stories with the world. Do you ever worry about your own safety from the prospect of Russians knowing what you're doing and how you're spreading the message?
Yeah, I do. And I think too, the more that I agitate, I worry more too about my personal safety, and that even extends to I don't publish anything about my personal life on the internet anymore.
Yeah,
I'm very deliberate about the things that I say. I have to instruct people close to me not to identify the nature of their relationships with me, lest they be potentially intimidated, even in Australia. That can create difficulties even in my intimate relationships with people, because I understand that social media is a big part of the way that people, I think, interact with modern life. But I can't put photographs of me and my partner on the internet, and I can't allow them to do the same thing. There are a lot of steps and active thinking that go into taking care of myself, and ultimately in war, things can just happen where you might die. I had a near miss a few days ago where a number of rockets, which I believe were launched from a helicopter, landed within about 100 meters of where I was talking with some civilians, and if they would have shot a little bit further, I probably would have been hurt. So it's no matter how many precautions you take, you're always at risk doing this type of work, and I understand that it puts a target on my back, not only from potential like bad actors, but also from people that don't like the work that I do or people that don't like me as a person. So it brings a lot of attention to you, but I think it's worth it and important to do.
It's so worth it. And sitting here from Christo and my perspective, just so much admiration for what you're doing to keep the voice of Ukrainian people alive. Because if you weren't doing it, who knows what would be seeing? It would be very little.
Yeah, I'm grateful for you saying that. Actually, a big motivation and part of the reason why I've continued coming back here so often is because like I genuinely have this feeling, especially as it relates to Australia, if I don't do it, who will?
Yeah.
And at times I almost feel like it's probably an unhealthy motivation because frankly, before the invasion, I felt the war actually in Donbass was winding down. And I thought like, well, I'm always going to cover Ukraine and I love the history and culture here, but how do I do this in a sustainable way? Because I was sort of fatigued, honestly, from the war. Yeah. And the invasion happened and then I understood, okay, well, actually now I have to sort of suck it up and I have all the years of experience and everything kind of like led to this point, in my opinion, and now is the chance I have to make a big impact.
So where are you finding happiness? It's an awkward question asking that from where you're sitting at the moment, but are you happy? Are there moments of happiness? Are there moments that you feel joy in what you're doing?
Yeah, I'm very fulfilled by, like, a big part of the reason why I wanted to come back was to do more humanitarian volunteering. So, for example, last week we went out to a town near the Frontline to go and observe some military movements, and we understood, my French colleague Guillaume Patak and I understood that people needed help. So I crowdfunded through Instagram and raised money, and then we were driving out to the frontline areas every day and delivering humanitarian aid to people and learning more about the people there. And it's like, that stuff is very fulfilling for my soul. And I genuinely believe what I'm doing here is like, I have a purpose to be here. And I had to make sacrifices in my own personal life, which were really difficult to sort of come back here and to do this. But it's important, and I do get joy out of helping people or the small moments. I share laughter with my colleague. I try and still connect to some of my hobbies. Like I like to watch YouTube videos about computer games by a content creator called Dr. Disrespect, and like just these small little things like that. Like my routine in life here is very different, but for my own mental health and something I talked about in therapy too, like, you have to, I guess, find those little moments of joy because otherwise it's a bit overwhelming.
That was going to be my next question. How do you keep your mental health in check when you're seeing the devastation, seeing bodies in the streets, all this type of thing? I can only imagine that. I guess, what tools do you use? I mean, I guess you've alluded to it just then. You've got your YouTube videos and things like that. So I guess it's a mental health question that I'd like to understand. How do you keep that completely in check and not keep you up at night?
It's a really good question, and sometimes I struggle with it, frankly. Like, when I knew that my friend was deployed to the east, I worried about his well-being, and I feel scared at times. Like, you feel guilty, like we were delivering aid to people, but I was trying to specifically target families with young children, and other people were getting angry at us because we weren't giving them stuff, and like having to literally get in the car and drive away, even though we'd helped families, it's fucking gut-wrenching, mate, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. And, I did therapy for last year, like for a year, and talked throughout the year, and I was talking with my therapist about experiences here and just sort of some of the stuff that happened. And, the biggest strategy honestly is just allowing myself to feel stuff, and I'm naturally quite empathetic, and it affects me on many different levels because like I have part of my life is here, my friends are here, I have emotional experiences here. I'm not a robot. Yeah. And I do allow myself to feel things, and I journal. Stoic philosophy helped me a lot. A lot of that kind of focuses around preservation of your like mind and soul regardless of the external sort of factors, and that's been a really big guiding force a writer, Ryan Holiday, writes a lot about Stoic philosophy, and that's had a really big impact on me over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I bet, because if you're an empath, then you would have to do a lot of work to not actually take on all the energy around you.
Yeah, I'm very, I try not to make it about me, but definitely I'm here as a conduit for other people's experiences and to share their stories. And frankly, you do feel people's pain. And even one family's home was destroyed when we went to Siversk, and we went to the home where they were now living, and the grandfather was very hostile, and he was very angry and upset because of what had happened, and he was taking it out on us, and we understood why he was upset. And then the next morning we went back there, and he said, look, I'm genuinely deeply really sorry for what happened. Can you please help me evacuate my family? And he was crying, apologizing, and I was just saying, man, it's cool, yeah. We get it. There's no hard feelings. We want to help you how we can. And you take that on board, and it's I can't save everybody, but I'm not just here to work as a journalist. I genuinely want to help as many people as I can, whether that's through educating people through Instagram, reporting on Twitter, doing news appearances, podcasts like this, which I'm really grateful to be able to reach out to people, but it does affect you, and you do take it on board, and you have to find peace with it at some point.
Do you find yourself going out, how we were just saying before that Kyiv itself is actually, still quite cosmopolitan. Do you find yourself going out to the bars there and having a drink, or is it just something you can't bring yourself to do?
Well, I don't really drink a lot of alcohol anyway, probably a rarely drinker type person, but
yeah.
For example, we got back to Kyiv, and yesterday I went and had a brunch with a friend, and it was just nice to have a coffee and to sit and talk. And after this, I'm going to go and meet, like I said, with my friend and her partner, and he's just returned from the frontline areas. And I try and allow myself to experience some level of normality, but I don't want to be self-indulgent and I guess forget the reality of what's going on. So I try and do everything within, I guess, what feels right to me.
I've got a question. Verozmovlada ukrainskою?
That's good.
Yeah.
I can speak Russian, and I'm learning Ukrainian, so that's really good.
Okay. Yeah, I learned a little bit. I wanted to immerse myself in Ukrainian culture when we went. So before going, I listened to, it would have been about...
Duolingo or something, wasn't it?
No. I bought an audiobook, a Ukrainian language audiobook, and I spent about 40 hours just listening to this audiobook on Ukrainian language, just so I could communicate when we were there.
Well, one thing I've found in my experience here is a lot of media that come and work here, even though the war's been going on for 8 years, very few of them make any effort to learn how to speak any. It's not just about Ukrainian language, they make any effort to learn even Russian, and certainly people are really now patriotic about the Ukrainian language and identity, but people here don't get offended when you, especially as a foreigner, that you talk to them in Russian or that you want to. In fact, I've had people in the public defend me from being criticized by other people for speaking Russian, and they say, no, it's a free country. We just want to talk with people. You speak whatever language you want in Ukraine. It's fine.
That moment, that language that he learnt, the sentence got us out of the shit with the police while we were there, which was fantastic. So it actually helped us a lot.
Yeah, that's amazing. See, and those, once you can connect with someone on that level, I think it kind of lowers the gates a little bit. And
it definitely did.
Even when I work in the field with my teammate, people even at the checkpoints are used to seeing journalists rolling around with a security team, a local producer, a camera operator, a translator, but it's just us two. And when we speak with them and connect on a human level, it's very disarming.
Well, this happened. We were walking through Kyiv, and I'm a photographer. I love taking photos, and I just wanted to get off the main drag for a second, just to sort of see what life was like, take a few photos, and find a few things. And the police just barreled up to us because I was carrying this big camera. And
I'm sure.
And Dion jumped in with that sentence, and they just, after patting us down and we were sort of hands behind our back up against the car, he said that, and they went, oh, okay, and then let us go. And we were like, oh, thank fuck.
I was trying to practice before going. It was something, I forgot what it was, but I was trying to practice take my friend, but I couldn't quite get it out. I couldn't quite get it out at the time. It was something like...
just sell your mate out.
Yeah. Just take him. Leave me alone. Vizmi Mohu Druha, I think it was. And that was...
That's great.
Yeah.
I really respect you actually for making the efforts, and like people here are really grateful. Even if I just say good morning to people in Ukrainian on the streets, like they Dobro ranok, they understand, and they're appreciative. And again, I've never had any issues speaking Russian here, even with Ukrainian nationalists. Like people, the whole language debate thing, it's largely Russian propaganda, and people here who speak Russian are not persecuted.
Now, I know you've got to go. I just want to ask, there's a place that's very close to my heart and has been for years, and for reasons I don't know, Chernobyl. I had always wanted to visit Chernobyl and the abandoned city of Pripyat. That is back under Ukrainian control, I believe.
Well, it was occupied, and the Russian military retreated from those areas a couple months ago, around that.
Yeah.
But yeah, Chernobyl, I know it's a very big tourist attraction, and I think it's like an ecological tourist attraction. And sadly now, during the Russian military occupation there, they actually dug trenches in some of the contaminated zones. I think a lot of those soldiers are very sick now, but further, I'm not sure how accessible Chernobyl will be in the future. So maybe, you guys, you went there at the right time. You might never be able to visit. Maybe I'm wrong. I just don't know the sort of ecological damage as a result of the occupation and how it might impact people's health.
I remember reading that. So, the Russians had taken control of it, but then, like you say, they were digging ditches and then dug up all the radioactive soil and became sick. So bailed the hell out of there as quick as they could. So,
not the smartest idea, was it?
No.
Now, just quickly before we let you go, are you still trying to raise money? Are you to try and help people on the front line? What is your work, and how can people contribute to what you're doing?
Well, the fundraising and crowdfunding stuff through Instagram has been really fulfilling. The next sort of big thing to enable me to continue reporting in Ukraine long term, I want to buy a car here. So we're actually going to do like a fundraiser to like basically raise money to buy a journalism/humanitarian aid vehicle to travel around and be able to be mobile throughout the country, and also do aid deliveries, because actually usually when we go out there it's like in rental cars and they freak out like they do. They're always worried about the car being blown up or things like this. So while I'm very grateful for the people that have allowed us to use their vehicles and stuff, it's just too stressful to worry about. And that's sort of the next big thing that I'm tracking towards, and going to set up some sort of fundraiser in the coming days, actually.
What's a car cost over there? Essentially, what's a budget for a car that'll get you a real?
I'll probably buy a secondhand, back home in Melbourne, I've got a Honda CR-V, which I love, and I wish I could just bring it over here, but probably buy a secondhand 4-wheel drive for 3,000 or 4,000 euros or something. And okay. I've already had someone commit to offering around $1,000 US. So, that's, I don't know what that works out in exchange, but I think what'll probably end up happening is that my teammate and I will chip in 25% each, and then we hope we can crowdfund the other 50%. That's sort of what we're thinking at the moment.
And did I read that you were doing a documentary? You're trying to put together a documentary on everything that's going on over there?
Yeah, it's been an ongoing thing that I've been filming, because originally when I came here before the invasion, my thought was, okay, I'm going to go and make a documentary about the situation in Donbass as it is now and the escalation and build up there. But I didn't expect the invasion would happen. So now I have all this footage from pre-invasion, going west with this massive exodus of refugees, interviews with my friends who were shot on the second day of the invasion, life in Kyiv when it was being bombed. I want to make maybe a 3 or 4 hour long project, and it's sort of something ongoing at this point.
Amazing.
You definitely should.
Yeah.
Look, Bryce, we can't thank you enough for giving us your time. We know that there's a lot going on over there. Please keep up the great work that you're doing. And look, I don't want to say we look forward to seeing what happens, because I don't know what that's going to entail, but we hope the situation improves, and we hope you get to live out your dreams over there, man.
I'm really grateful for your support, and just know, like, supporting you guys doing your work and everything, it's like when people genuinely reach out to me and want me to contribute and help them, like, I'll never say no. Like, I'm really thankful for the opportunity to share the experiences that I've had here and, like, the stories of Ukrainian people. And if this even educates one person, then, like, it's totally worth it. And I'll always take time to do stuff like this.
Thanks, mate. Double
Much
party,
love. Дуже дякую.
Brown Podcast.
Why are you happy?
Because I don't want to be sad.